Hello and thanks for joining us. To our viewers here in Korea and around the world, it's 10 a.m. on Friday, April 25th here in Seoul. I'm Mark Broom and you're tuned in to our ongoing coverage of the Sewol-ho ferry disaster. 181 people have now been confirmed dead in the sinking of the ferry and 121 others remain missing. In waters off Korea's southwestern coast where the accident happened, search and rescue operations are now into the 10th day. Not a single survivor has been found since the ferry capsized last Wednesday morning. For the latest, we now go live to our Song Ji-sung at Paengmok-hang Harbor, the nearest point of land to the accident site. Ji-sung.
Mark, the search and rescue operation goes on even though the conditions may not be as favorable as it has been over the past 3 days. The current will get stronger and more bodies have been discovered. A total of 22 more bodies were discovered and recovered from the ferry from Thursday to this morning. And the death toll now well exceeds the number of survivors at 181, with 121 still missing underwater. The divers focused their search on the fourth floor and where the cafeteria is, and on the fourth level of the ship where the cabins of most Danwon High School students were located. Divers also said there were no air pockets present inside the sunken ferry, reducing the chance of possible survivors after the ship submerged completely underwater. But the search will continue as parents of the missing have requested the ferry not to be lifted out of water until every body is recovered from underwater. 5 cranes are on standby, but no one assumes the lifting will take place anytime soon.
And Ji-sun, we understand that the family's frustration with the search operation has boiled over. There was a row between the parents and the authorities there. Can you tell us more about that?
As search and rescue operation their 10th day, despair turns into anger, and the desperate and angry parents are distrustful of the government, the authorities, and the ongoing operations here on site. In fact, they have been talking and speaking with this oceans minister, as well as the chief commissioner of the Coast Guard, and that talk has been going on overnight. The parents want more diving distance lines to be installed on the 4th deck of the sunken ferry, where most students are expected to be, and they're demanding more civilian divers be brought into operation. Families of the missing are convinced the authorities did not go forward with the rescue operation as they had been told, and it's pretty clear at this point that the private divers who volunteered to take part in the rescue operation pulled out after conflicting with the Navy and Marine divers. Parents want them back in the water as they think there are not enough divers out there to recover the bodies of their children. There are also allegations the authorities only allowed a certain private company to dive, and that company reportedly has links to ferry's operator, Chung Hae-jin. The oceans minister has been talking with the family since around 5 p.m. Thursday afternoon, and the parents are demanding he stay on site until the last student is brought back on shore. They are not allowing press inside that tent, but some parents are reportedly out on the waters on the barge where divers engage in search operation, and are also demanding each and every process is reported to them immediately on site. This has been Song Ji-sung reporting live from Paengmok-hang Harbor in Sindo.
Now, the Ansan Olympic Memorial Hall was busy all night long, and it's filling up again this morning with visitors from all walks of life lining up to lay flowers in front of the portraits of the young people who so tragically lost their lives in this awful disaster. We're now going to connect live to our Kim Ji-yeon, who's outside the Memorial Hall. Ji-yeon.
Hello, Mark. It's the 10th day since the ferry sinking. Funerals of more than 20 high school students were held today. Among them was a 17-year-old Russian-Korean, Serko Vyacheslav, whose dream it was to become a professional swimmer and swim for the Korean national team. Inside the hall behind me, there are portraits of 65 high school students and teachers. It was quiet earlier this morning, but more people are coming here now to pay their respects. Over the past several days, around 43,000 people have said their last goodbyes to those who lost their lives in the sinking. The whole nation is mourning for the victims.
I know it's very painful for you, but we will be supporting you. I heard you've hardly been eating. Please take care of yourself.
No words will console you, but please know that many people are feeling the pain with you and crying with you. I wish the students will go to heaven and live happily.
So the sun might be shining here in Korea, but dark clouds of sorrow still hang over the nation. And for those who didn't have a chance to pay a visit to the memorial yet, when and how can people go?
Well, the memorial altar here is open 24 hours a day except for certain times of the day due to maintenance purposes, but it will be open throughout the weekend. And there's another group memorial altar in the southwestern city of Mokpo, closer to the accident site. That memorial altar near the city's main train station, the Mokpo station, will open at 11 a.m. just an hour from now. And more than 50,000 people have paid a visit to the altar set up online for the deceased high school students and teachers. This has been Kim Jeon live at the Ansan Olympic Memorial Hall.
Now, it's not just those of us here in Korea, but people around the world have reached out to Korea in its time of need. Korean Americans have set up memorial altars throughout the United States, expressing their deep support for the victims and their families. Kim Hyun-bin reports.
Overseas Koreans in Los Angeles set up a memorial altar in front of the Korean consulate, and it's been adorned with messages of hope and flowers.
It is heartbreaking for the children. I've been keeping them in my prayers since the incident.
Memorial altars have been set up across the world by Koreans living overseas. Those visiting a temporary altar in Washington, D.C. said they were at a loss for words about the tragedy and plan on holding a fundraiser for the victims' families.
It's not just in Korea, but people in the U.S. as well are also crying for the lost ones.
In Times Square in New York, more than 200 Koreans and foreigners attended a memorial ceremony to show support for Korea and all those here who are suffering from the devastating tragedy. Kim Hyun-bin, ARIRANG News.
The families of those still unaccounted for from the sunken ferry asked search crews to finish search operations by Thursday last night. But as 121 people, mostly teenagers, are still missing, it looks as though the search will take longer. The amount of time this is taking has angered many of the family members, and there was a big commotion overnight at the Jindo Gymnasium where the family members wait for word on these search operations. Let's connect live to our Connie Lee at the gym. Connie, what's going on there right now?
Hey Mark, well so far it's been pretty quiet here on this Friday morning as things seem to have settled down from last night. Late yesterday we had some unexpected commotion break out as families of those still missing broke out in anger and in frustration. They stormed out of the gym and onto a bus that was headed to Paengmok-hang Harbor, or the closest area to the sunken ferry site. They went to that area to join the protests there and confront search officials. Family members had asked officials to finish search operations by Thursday, but by late yesterday, more than 120 were still missing. Family members here also say that officials are not doing their best in finding their loved ones underwater. Mark.
And hopes have dimmed for finding any more survivors as the days tick by, and more than a week now. Family members wanting the bodies of their loved ones before they decompose too much, sadly. They must be losing hope now that the weather is expected to worsen.
Yes, Marco, like you said, the families here have been waiting at the Jindo Gymnasium for the past 10 straight days now. So as you can imagine, they're clearly exhausted and just tired of waiting. Now, the gym is nearly half the size now, noticeably less crowded as people have been leaving once their loved ones have been found. But the family members here, though, are trying not to lose hope. More than 120 people still unaccounted for, so that means more than 120 families still have loved ones not confirmed dead yet. I've been talking with a father who is looking for his 17-year-old son, and all he says is, "I want my son out of that ship as soon as possible." Him and his friends who are here to support him say they will not leave the gym until his son is found. Reporting live from the Jindo Gymnasium, this has been Connie Lee.
Hundreds of Navy, Coast Guard and civilian divers have been working around the clock 24/7 to find any survivors inside the sunken ferry, pushing themselves to the limit of what's physically, emotionally, mentally possible. They're also at a growing risk of developing potentially lethal disorders as they dive deeper and deeper into the cold and murky waters. Paulie reports.
The Korean Navy's underwater demolition team and salvage unit have become the backbone of the search and rescue operation at the ferry disaster site. These highly trained divers are only supposed to make a single dive per day. However, many are forgoing this safety protocol in an attempt to find more missing passengers, often jumping into the water 3 times within 24 hours. To make matters worse, the heavy currents are impeding the speed of divers, often forcing them to stay underwater for longer periods of time, putting them at greater risk of accidents. A Navy officer on Tuesday received urgent medical treatment after his arms were suddenly paralyzed.
There are limitations to diving. Depending on the rate of activity, the ability of divers in the water to tolerate their external environment is sensitive.
This past week alone, 10 divers were treated in hyperbaric oxygen chambers for decompression sickness, commonly known as diver's disease. It's a condition where inert gases form bubbles inside the body due to the growing pressure surrounding the diver. Many symptoms include intense joint pains, paralysis, and even death. It's the same disorder that took the life of a diver who was participating in rescue efforts following the sinking of the Cheonan warship 4 years ago.
Some divers that go into the water can't remember what they did. Since they can't even think and act, they don't have conscious control of their bodies. That's decompression sickness. They have to quickly get inside a chamber and receive treatment and be made to rest.
In response, the government says it is taking necessary measures to ensure the safety of all rescue workers at the site as these deep-sea divers continue on with their tireless efforts to recover victims and locate any survivors. Paul Yi, ARIRANG News.
The tragic events of the past week or so have taken a toll on everyone here in Korea, not to mention the families, friends and classmates of the missing and the victims. Doctors say emotional stress in times like this can affect your health, even if you aren't directly affected by the disaster. So Mi-so-rang explains.
People in Korea have been glued to the TV since the sinking of the Sewol ferry. Sadness and anger are common feelings felt by people watching the incident unfold before their eyes.
My heart would beat fast and I would get teary-eyed. It's just too sad, those young kids.
As a Korean citizen and as a parent of kids, I feel for the parents. It makes me sad.
With catastrophes that affect an entire nation, the extreme stress felt by its citizens can put them more at a risk for heart problems. Research shows that high levels of stress produce stress hormones, which can then have damaging effects on the heart. After the deadly earthquake in LA back in 1994, studies reveal that the number of people who died of heart attacks spiked tenfold. A sudden increase in stress increases the blood pressure and makes a person more susceptible to infections and blood clots.
Rapid increase of stress causes inflammation and hardening of arteries, and the substance in your body that inhibits inflammation in blood vessels called the NO is less produced.
Being depressed also puts one at a higher risk of heart problems. Experts say that during times of high stress, people crave foods that are spicy or salty. And exercising, that takes the back seat. Doctors recommend people should make efforts to calm their emotions and have a set routine schedule. People with high blood pressure or high cholesterol should take extra care that their mental condition does not worsen their physical being. 서미소랑, ARIRANG News.
Authorities are broadening their investigation into what exactly happened on the day the Sewol-ho ferry capsized and who is responsible for this man-made disaster. For more, we're joined in the studio by Shin Se-min. So, Se-min, what's the latest? We hear all the crew that survived are in some kind of legal trouble.
Yes, so far, it looks like all 15 rescued crew members, including Captain Lee Jun-seok, will face criminal charges. Now, 11 have already been charged with negligent homicide while violating maritime law, with the remaining 4 under investigation as suspects. Comments made by some of the crew members are causing quite a stir as well. One testified that crew members, including himself, were in a room less than just 10 meters away from where the passenger cabins were right before they fled the ship, which clearly suggests they did not follow the standard protocol to help passengers escape.
And questions continue to mount about the crew's actions or lack of actions, really. What about the cause of the sinking? Are we any closer to finding out what exactly happened?
Well, not really. I can only tell you that at this point, investigators are looking into all possibilities. Prosecutors are looking into another similar vessel, the Ohamanaho ferry, also owned by the Cheonghaejin Marine Company, the operator of the sunken Sewol-ho ferry, to find possible clues. Now, a number of possible causes have been raised over the past several days, but 3 have emerged as the most probable scenarios as of now. One is that Sewol-ho ferry made a sudden right turn as it attempted to do a P-turn, and experts say the hull was turned back again, but the ferry didn't come back to its original position, possibly causing operations to freeze momentarily. Now, this is when another factor comes in. The 3,500 tons of freight on board was not secured properly, and this caused all the containers and vehicles in the cargo hold to list to one side, tilting it even further with the concentrated weight on just one side. And lastly, there's also the possibility renovation made to the ferry to maximize the number of passengers and cargo made it unstable. Now, the advisory panel of 13 experts will meet for the first time around 3 p.m. Korea time today to figure out what exactly caused the ferry to sink and what exactly went wrong. Now, professors, marine and shipping experts and representatives from the shipping industry will attempt to reconstruct the accident using a mock-up of the ferry.
Okay, Se-min, thanks for your report and do keep us updated throughout the day. The victims of the ferry sinking will be high on U.S. President Barack Obama's mind when he arrives in Seoul on this Friday for talks with President Park Geun-hye. The U.S. leader, who is due to arrive in a couple of hours' time, is expected to deliver his country's deepest sympathies to the victims and the families of the Sewol-ho ferry disaster. Also on the agenda will be security issues. The 2 leaders will discuss ways to respond to North Korea's latest nuclear threats. Obama is expected to also call for easing of regional tensions sparked by territorial disputes. The visit will be President Obama's 4th to Korea, representing the most trips to the country by a sitting U.S. president. Time now for a look through the international headlines. We'll turn to our Eunice Kim standing by at the News Centre for that. Good morning, as always, to you, Eunice. Now, tensions keep rising over Ukraine, with US Secretary of State John Kerry directing some blunt words at Russia and its President Vladimir Putin.
Hi, Mark. Indeed, they were his sharpest words yet. He underlined over and over that Ukraine has upheld its part of the deal striked among foreign ministers in Geneva last week, but that Russia has taken, quote, not a single step in the right direction to de-escalate tensions, that is, to pressure separatists in Ukraine to back off. Take a listen.
Following today's threatening movement of Russian troops right up to Ukraine's border, let me be clear. If Russia continues in this direction, it will not just be a grave mistake, it will be an expensive mistake.
Kerry issued his warning out of the State Department's briefing room late Thursday, Washington time, and as U.S. President Barack Obama from Japan had said that new sanctions were, quote, teed up. Meanwhile, Russian President Vladimir Putin warned of consequences should Kiev use force against its own people. Deadly clashes erupted on the ground in eastern Ukraine, with as many as 5 pro-Russian rebels reported killed by Ukrainian forces. Russia responded to the violence by launching new military drills along its border with Ukraine. And turning now to developments in the Middle East, Israel has suspended U.S. moderated peace talks, one day after Palestine's Mahmoud Abbas government agreed to reunite with its rival Hamas. An official statement said the government of Israel will not hold negotiations with a government backed by a, quote, terror organization that calls for Israel's destruction. Israel, the U.S. and the EU regard Hamas as a terrorist group in part for the near-daily attacks it has aimed at Israel from the Gaza Strip. On Monday, a surprise unity pact was reached between the dominant Fatah faction and the Islamist Hamas group, a first such move in years. And a report by a leading NGO has found that the European Union's lack of transparency makes it vulnerable to corruption and special interests. Transparency International released its report in Brussels Thursday and cited complex decision-making procedures and opaque bureaucratic negotiations, adding that the 28-state bloc did not have built-in systems to protect whistleblowers. The report examined governance and transparency mechanisms in 10 EU institutions.
Let's get a weather update in Chindo and around the country. The neap tide period ended yesterday, so things will get rough again over at the site. The waves and winds will get stronger, and it seems like things will get even tougher as we have heavy rain and gusty winds in the forecast at the Exton site over the weekend. Though we have 3 opportunities for the day when the currents are weaker. One is coming up shortly at 11:16. The another at 5:35 and the other at 11:10 tonight. The speed of flow should slow it down 1 hour before and 1 after these times. Well, including Chindo, the rest of the country should continue to have early summer-like conditions. In fact, it will be warmer than yesterday. But at the same time, the air will remain quite dry with dry weather advisory in effect in most parts of the peninsula. So do keep that in mind, and let's take a closer look at the readings for today. The high in Seoul and Daegu will rise to 27 and Daegu will soar to 28, while Busan peaks at 23. Now let's see how other regions are looking. It looks like down on Jeju will rise to 24. Dokdo should see a high of 20, while Mount Kumgang peaks at 19. Well, that's all I have for you at this hour, but I'll be back with more updates after noon.
And those are the updates we have for you at this hour. Korea Today is coming up in half an hour's time, and our news team will be continuing our comprehensive coverage of the Sewol-ho ferry disaster and the ongoing search and rescue efforts throughout the day. Goodbye.